Welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Lens with your host, Jake and Scott. We are excited to welcome a Patreon member, first and foremost, but also one of the unsung heroes of bourbon and whiskey. You may know him as Take, we know him as Jay, so sit back and buckle into the latest episode of the Bourbon Lens. Jay West, thank you for joining us. You are a man of many identities, but Take is probably the alter ego that most people know you by. Thank you for spending a few moments with Scott and I here on a not so cold January night in Kentucky and Virginia.
Yeah, certainly. These four letters are happy to join you. Thanks for having me, guys.
Hey, we're excited. We have gotten to know you over the years in many different partnerships, whether that's when you started working with Shared Pour at the very beginning, or, reading all the Reddit content you have created, or all the other stuff you've done. And there's been a lot, and it's hard to name. So we are going to take a moment to allow Jay Take to explain himself here to our listeners, because I would do a terrible job of it.
That's a lot of pressure. For doing this for 10 years, I need an elevator pitch guy to get it down to a sentence. But, Jay West, better known as Take. I think the most important part is that I'm the principal whiskey maker for the Reveries and for Provenance out in Middleburg, Virginia. It's been a long road. I've done a lot of stuff before that, right? Like I sold a blog in 2020 that became Whiskey Raiders with Dan Abrams. Left that in March of 2025 to do whiskey full time, right, from a production standpoint. But outside of that, you've seen me on Reddit and Instagram. One of my big passions is to travel the country and buy whiskey and, have some big collaborations that have come out thanks to great partnerships and creative people. And so, I think at the end of the day, you see the four letters Take, and hopefully it's on whiskey that you enjoy or are about to enjoy. And that's kind of fed everything. So that's my,
No, it was great.
It's a work in progress pitch, but I'm getting there.
Hey, it's under a minute. So that was good. Proud of you there. Let's start with Reddit. Reddit is a deep, dark dungeon that a lot of people can go down. And so how did you start the Reddit page that has grown to be wildly successful? I think there's over 250,000 people that are subscribed to the subreddit, which is insane.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes a lot of damn work. So why there? How did you explain that?
Yeah, I don't want to start the podcast with setting the record straight, but I'm thrilled I didn't start our bourbon, right? So I am one of the moderators of the subreddit on Reddit called r/bourbon. So it's the subreddit all about bourbon. I'm actually, a lot of people think I'm like the top mod or the original mod or the most important mod, and I'd say all of the things are pretty inaccurate. Joined the mod team in 2016. So, just a little bit after I started posting, I became a regular poster and knew a lot of the folks, got to know a lot of the folks, and there'd been some changes on the site, and they said, hey, you were moderating a bunch of this other stuff, but those subs went away due to some changes on Reddit. So, we'd love to have your talents here because clearly you like whiskey and stuff like that. So I think even today, I'm like, what I call myself is the middle mod. There are mods that have been around longer than I am, and there are mods that are newer than I am. And I think arguably all of them do a lot more than I do. But one of my goals is to be as present as possible and as available as possible. And I run the single barrel program for the subreddit, which is why a lot of people see me. And I think that's a very public component. But I do like to be super clear that I think of all the people who do the most work, I am near the bottom. And of the people that are tenured, I'm in the middle. And in importance, I'm near the bottom. But I get to do some really cool stuff. And thanks to the buy-in from the community and the fact that I just love hanging out with the community as much as I can all the time, whenever I can, it's been a great place. And I got started on Reddit because when I started writing about whiskey, I thought, like, what's the point of tasting whiskey if you're not going to, like, keep sort of a mental note? And, like, I'm an engineer with ADD, and so keeping a mental note is a pretty bad idea. And so I started writing down, and I thought, oh, there's actually this community. When you're an engineer, the best thing to do is to take notes and then share them with people, and people will tell you you're either on the right track or you're super wrong. And Reddit's pretty good about telling you if you're right or wrong pretty quickly. And so it was just a place to be a ledger. And it turns out I discovered this whole community talking about whiskey as I was learning to get into whiskey. And so I told myself, like, if I could post about one whiskey a day, maybe for a couple of weeks, I'd like really learn a lot about whiskey. And I figured I'd get bored or I'd get distracted because, ADD and engineering and years later, I'm still doing it. So it's been a really cool transformation. It's unlocked an incredible community. And some of my best friends I met there, there were people that were internet people with also other weird usernames, and now they're friends, and I've been to some weddings, and it's just crazy, like, how the world goes. But pre-COVID, Reddit was kind of shunned, right? Like it was a dungeon. People thought it was a weird place full of weird people. But then COVID came and suddenly Reddit was really cool because the people who love to shun Reddit needed a place to meet other people and hawk their wares and find new audiences. And we had been there the whole time.
Come out of the shadows for once, right?
Or drag them into the shadows. Yeah.
That's what it is.
For sure. Well, and I appreciate you explaining that because I truly didn't know. So, hey, learning something new here on the podcast. I like when the record is set straight and credit is where credit's due. But you've picked hundreds, if not thousands of single barrels at this point as well. And so, that gets you into a passion, right? You've gone to a plethora of distilleries, you've tried different things, you've blended different things, which kind of leads you down a path after you've picked barrels, you've built these relationships with people. That's led you into bigger and better and greater things that you've been able to do. You mentioned Whiskey Raiders, which is now transformed even again, I think.
Right.
Since
they've had a couple rebrands. Yeah. Every time I turn around, I'm like, oh, it's a different name, but in a cool way.
So those things have changed. What was it like to work with, someone like Dan Abrams as you kind of come out of this Reddit culture where you've written and you've done a lot of, collaborative stuff, and then to partner with someone very prominent, from that perspective to build another whiskey community?
Yeah, a lot of people have a lot of opinions about Dan because Dan also does a lot of stuff, right? And so it was really fascinating to go through kind of that founder's journey of like, create something and then sell it. And then after you sell it, you come along, right? Like I sold my blog to Dan because we were going to create something bigger out of it. And so I have nothing but incredible things to say about Dan because a lot of people, I would clue them in like, hey, I'm actually going through this big acquisition, or it was, not big, but it was big to me. And I think it was big for the industry and kind of what it symbolized and what it was. But, a lot of people are like, oh, you're going to regret this. Like you're giving up your baby, you're giving it to someone else. And my time with Dan, and I said this, to some other folks, like every crazy idea, anyone should have said no. But Dan was like, dude, like we got here because you were super passionate. If you think it's a good idea, let's do it. We'll do it until it doesn't work. And then we're going to find the next crazy idea because Dan was all about like, Dan has like media is a crazy idea. It's the intersection of culture and politics, right? Or law and crime. We're going to stream court cases because a few people might find it interesting. Turns out millions and millions and millions of people, and they sold that for 9 figures, so like, Dan was a great enabler in a way that gave me resources and people and staff. And like I learned to be a manager and have a team, and they came with incredible benefits. And so I think a lot of people, made me worried during the process of acquisition, even post acquisition, like you're going to lose your passion, like you're going to lose control. Your baby's not going to be your baby anymore. And like, it was really fun to actually work there for 5 years and try every crazy idea that came across our desk. People would come to me with crazy ideas and I'd be like, wow, this is wild. But like, we actually have the tools to do it. We have the people to do it. We have the resources to do it. And so when I left 5 years later, it was leaving to be like, this thing grew into a totally different thing than we thought it would be, but like in a really cool way because there was no shackles that you kind of anticipated you get after like a corporate entity buys like a passion project. So to me, it was an incredible experience. And also like by the time I left, I also felt like I was leaving it in a better state, a bigger state. It had more direction than it ever had. And I had discovered this new direction within myself. And I was like, all right, now I actually feel good to go, maybe not start this journey again, right? Like, with whether someone buys a label or something is whatever. But, it was cool to me to be like, I've seen the life cycle of something that was a little passion project through. And now I'm like, I'm on to the next passion project. And that's been really cool as well.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's pretty cool. I did not realize that was 5 years. That went by extremely fast.
So quick.
And it was cool because you expanded, right? Like there was rum raiders and other, spirits, and you all were able to do a lot of cool things in a very short period of time, which was cool because, we explored and have explored other spirits. And so it opens up your world and your flavor profiles and your taste buds to a whole new set of things that you didn't even know existed. I feel like when you do that. So, I appreciate you all continue pushing the envelope while you were there. And that led you to more collaborations, more opportunities. And in the pre-show, Scott hit on, one of your big collaborative partners that you've worked with is Barrel. Right. And the team there has, it's kind of like Willy Wonka's playground for blending, right? That's the best way to kind of say it. And so you've done a lot of cool things. And so what's it like to have these collaborations where it's not only these big brands, Barrel, Bardstown Bourbon Company, or Penelope that you've worked with, and putting your name on something and saying like, not only does it get their stamp of approval, it also gets mine.
Right. The collaborations are really cool to me, right? Because when you get into single barrels, to me, it's what I call like the curation to creation pipeline. So, pipeline implies that it's commercial and it's like repetitive and templatized. But to me, when I go to a distillery, it's either to curate something or to create something. And both of those things to me are super exciting. But what I really set out to when I started the barrel program, right? We did 1 barrel in 2019 and 8 in 2020, and then 128 in 2021 is like this insane growth. You can only horizontally scale, right? You can only do more and more barrels for so long. And also, a lot of folks, even at that many barrels, still have the 1 barrel they really want, and then they miss out, right? They're like, oh man, there's hundreds of thousands of us and 168 of that thing. Like someone statistically has to miss out. And so collaborations for me opened the door with people that I enjoyed working with on single barrels, right? And I started to develop professional and personal relationships and be like, oh, there's this brand, like I can call up, at the time his name was Will Schragus, right? Worked at Barrelcraft Spirits. And I say 70% of the time he would call me and be like, I have this insane idea. And like, you can kind of see this as a repetitive thread. Like, I have this insane idea. And I'd be like, I'm super in. Or I'd be like, whoa, too insane. Not a good fit. But then what was really cool is something that's really rare is I could pick up the phone and say, hey, I have this insane idea. And 70% of the time he'd be like, shoot, that's crazy cool. And then 30%, he'd be like, whoa, too crazy. What I really realized is that a lot of companies are really open to these collaborations, and it makes sense. And so with the platform for the barrels that I had built, there was actually enough volume, like we could justify doing 100 cases, right? A single barrel might be 15, 20, 25 cases. We could do 100 cases. We could do 200 cases. We could do 500 cases. As long as it was thoughtfully made, it also let us unlock some levers to create products that didn't make sense at a single barrel level. And also customers and consumers think that like a great single barrel is amazing, but so many people still think that blends are like a way to use bad whiskey instead of a way to take the best whiskeys and ingredients. Like Barrelcraft Spirits is the Willy Wonka, right? They do a great job of taking really good whiskeys and elevating them through really thoughtful blending. And so I wanted to kind of attack that with consumers as well and say like, you like these single barrels, but if we took 5 or 6 or 8 of them and put them together, when it's done right, the results should be insane. They should be incredible. And more of you get to experience it. And we're probably going to get a better price too, which is good for everyone. And so we started with blends and we started with finishes and we found things like I love Sauternes and Ratafia Champagne and, all this kind of crazy stuff. And so, I'm really thrilled that people like Barrelcraft Spirits and Found North and Bardstown Bourbon Company and Penelope have all over the years been like, hey, like you're an okay guy to work with and we trust you with our brand, right? Like I have a voice and I'm going to talk about their brand. And like, I tell people like my job is just to amplify the cool parts of your brand so that new people can hear them. And, a few more people will learn about what I do too. But if less people miss out and they get a great whiskey at a great price that they love, and it's something different from anything that's on their shelf, and more people get to hear about the thing that's super cool about Barrel or Found North or, Bardstown Bourbon Company or Penelope, then that to me is a huge success. And so that's kind of, we'll see what the next stages of that look like. But last year felt like just a cannon going off left and right. Like all the years of collaborative work came together with the Penelope Noble, and even the F Cancer Cast Strength blend that was a limited edition just for shared pour. And like Bardstown Bourbon Company greenlit like a collaboration with a person, which is something they were like, well, we don't really want to do it. And then after a while, they're like, this is actually too cool. We kind of have to do it, and like, and Dan Calloway and I are different but same in a lot of cool ways. I won't speak for him, but it was one of the coolest things I did last year. So that's kind of the runway of how we get there. But to me, it's kind of the future of how you do thoughtful collaborations that hopefully mean more to the drinkers themselves.
Mm. Yeah, and you even pushed the boundary with barrel, right? So someone who pushes the boundary with like seagrass, right? A very interesting thing. You even elevated that further. And those were the things that I found interesting when the releases would come out. It was like you took something that was already kind of wonky and you like elevated it past that. Like seagrass is one of my favorite bottles to buy people because it's like, you might not like whiskey, but you like Peachos more than likely. So here's a bottle that's like fun and drinks like candy.
Yeah.
And so it's fun to see that you took something that they think is fun and elevated and twisted it around a little bit more. And then they replicated some of the things that you came out with first, which I thought was also pretty hilarious, like the Toasted series and things that you all have done.
And that to me, like another great example, right, is I lived in Wisconsin for a decade, so I'm very close with Driftless Glen. In fact, they were one of my first barrels, and it's even crazy. Like back in 2019, I was buying 4-year-old whiskey, and now they're like, dude, you want one of our first 10-year barrels? I'm like, holy shit. Like, we're talking about 10-year whiskey? Like, time does fly. But I helped them launch like a finished a finished line. We called it the exclusive cask series, which was Jay is going to greenlight putting whiskey into all these new finishing barrels that Jay is super passionate about. I'm going to commit to buy all of it. So there's really not that much risk to the distillery. And one of them was Sauternes, right? They were like, hey, we actually tried the Sauternes and we loved it. And we know it works now. Would you guys be okay if like we actually made that a core product for us because we loved it and we tasted a couple of our customers on it? And they're like, but we don't want to step on your toes. And I was like, no. Like that means the partnership worked. Like I got to do something cool and new and crazy and to get to bring this out and do some stuff and like experiment in ways. But like you got to discover a whole product that hopefully will go on to be a repetitive, strong, different revenue source that kind of helps bring people in, like, whether you say I was involved with it or not, right? If you're like, hey, we met this guy Jay and he told us to do this weird shit with Sauternes, you know, like that doesn't really matter to me. But like the fact that like hopefully some people are like, oh shoot, like Driftless is doing crazy stuff, and like the fact that our little partnership made that happen in a way that they're like, yeah, we actually discovered a whole new product and we're passionate about it and love it, it is what's cool to me. It's like seeing brands be like, hey, that thing we did was neat. Like, would you mind if we kept doing it? To me is like, no, it means it's successful. So the next time I've come up with something crazy, you guys are like, well, it worked once. Like, well, let's do it again.
Yeah. Well, like the optics of it for a brand to embrace the consumer and like ultra passionate fans and even a little bit of media, you know, it's just the brands aren't just these big behemoths that are just putting out whiskey to put out whiskey. They're taking consumer feedback. They're taking the truly passionate fans' input and then saying, let's keep this thing going.
Definitely. And it's a great way to remind people like brands are made of people. You know, a good brand isn't so big that it was just like a big gray box in the sky, like the cloud or something. You know, I love it when people are like, oh, shoot, like that brand was listening. You know, it's a lot of people, but like it's listening. And that's a lot of people aren't used to being listened to, especially now in a digital age. And that's really cool, too.
I like that you liked Sauternes because we went with Sauternes very, very early on in the Bourbon Lens journey as well.
Yeah.
Big fan.
Yeah, big fan of Sauternes. Actually, we moved that through shared pour back in the original ownership, and it sold out rather quickly with a Starlight Sauternes barrel. And I finished off my father-in-law's that I gifted him over Christmas. So,
the
yay for me.
Keeps on giving.
Yeah, exactly. You know, when you're at Christmas and you're like, what's to drink? A barrel I picked. Great.
I'm familiar with that.
It's like a time capsule of sorts. You're like, I forgot I gave this to you. I'm going to take it back over the course of the next 12 hours, you know?
Yeah.
However long.
Yeah. We're going to drink this together.
Yeah. I was kind of like, you know, I'm putting batteries in toys. I need something to do. And yeah, that was Sauternes Starlight. And they were one of the first people that I ever had Sauternes with. And so like you've picked many of Starlight barrels. They're known for crazy barrels and finishes, and Christian will import just about any type of barrel that he can to make something happen. So it's fun to be able to explore those different finishing casks. And and now my mind is just on the old Pulteney Sauternes finished Coastal series. And that might be one of my favorite scotches I've ever drank.
Pulteney does so well in a wine cast too. I love Pulteney.
I know this is
really underrated.
Focused. Yeah, they are.
You're going overseas on us.
I've dragged you to the dungeon and I can drag you to Scotland.
Trust me. If we need to go to Scotland and you need extra drinkers, here, I just renewed my passport today. But, you know, all these passion things have led you to this new passion project. You took yourself from the cold north to the coast-ish, right? And you moved to a adjacent commonwealth of the Kentucky to Virginia. And you have started in a whole new project. And you are now creating and buying and curating your own whiskey brand. What's it like to be able to say, you know what, all of these things as a blog writing fool, you know, a couple years ago, 10 years ago, now it's turned this into like, I actually get to make this a living.
Sure. Yeah. It's, you know, we'll get to the Reveries in a minute, but it's one of the reasons it's called the Reveries, right? Is like to be lost in a dreamlike state. Like it's a dream, you know, even the worst days, right? Where you're like, wow, everything sucks. And you're like, well, but I work in whiskey. It doesn't suck that bad, you know, which is a privilege. You know, a lot of people, I constantly remind myself that like even the worst day working in whiskey is a privilege that a lot of people spend a lot of time dreaming about. First and foremost, you know, I try and keep that in perspective, but moving from, you know, creative, so like writing about whiskey, reviewing whiskey, a lot of people are like, hey, are you going to stop reviewing whiskey? And I was like, no, I think it's important to like still try a lot of new stuff and write about it, right? And get people's thoughts. The single barrel program, a lot of people have also asked, okay, now that you make whiskey, are you going to stop doing the single barrel program? And I say, no, probably not that either, because that's how I found all this great whiskey, right? every whiskey that goes into Provenance and the Reveries, I know who made it. I visited them personally. I believe that the reason I'm buying it from them is because I could become a distiller, but that person is 1,000 times better at distilling than I will ever be. And I don't really want to get a biochem degree, or a chem degree or whatever. But the, you know, I've been stashing whiskey for a really long time, and now I have the opportunity to find even more of that stuff. And a lot of people think it stops with just the whiskey, but I've got stuff from all over the world, which is really cool because even before whiskey, I was into cognac and rum and Armagnac and stuff like that. But the journey from being a critic to creating whiskey, I think really feels really different on the outside, but internally isn't that different, right? Through tasting thousands of whiskeys, I kind of know what I like, kind of know what I don't like. Kind of, to me, it's really understanding how whiskeys come together. And I've made lots of things that don't work. I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, who are you to make blends of whiskey? And you're like, well, I know a bad blend when I see one, and I've made plenty of those. And the goal is to keep those in the shed forever. But also, because this has been my job to think about whiskey for so long, I've also really thought about what are the whiskeys that I don't see out there that I would like? What are the whiskeys I love most? And how do I spin those in a way that's creative and innovative to me? And so like Provenance, as we were really working on, I was like, what is missing in the market? And ultimately at this time, right? Like 10 years ago, there was a lot less whiskey brands. I think you could be justified to say like, God, I wish there was a little more whiskey on the shelf because I'm missing a full proof rye at like 115 proof. Like that wasn't super common 10 years ago. Now there's a million whiskey brands. And so one of the things that my partner VS and I really took a lot of time on thinking too is like, does the world need another whiskey brand? And if we are going to bring a new whiskey brand, it needs to mean something, like it needs to matter. And so we really latched onto this idea of provenance, which folks with a wine background will be like, oh, that's interesting because provenance means a very specific thing in wine. It means you can trace where that bottle has been since the moment it was bottled. And that's a little bit harder with casks of whiskey. But to me, it's really like, I know who made it. I have visited that place. I trust that person as a producer. I like that thing for a reason, whether it's, some of the Reveries, like the smallest lot I have is only 6 barrels because a producer made something wild and cool. And I asked to buy it. And they're like, actually, we can't sell it to you. We don't have a label for it. And I said, well, how are you going to sell it? And they said, well, actually, we can't sell it. And I said, all right, well, then I'm going to buy it and I'll figure out the selling part later. And that became the Reveries later on. But all of those things pieced together give us this crazy cool tapestry of whiskeys, whether it's single barrels that are the Provenance flagship 7-year or like our 14-year blend that I think is some of the best whiskey I've ever drank. And that's not really me tuning my own horn. It's just like, that is a really good whiskey. I'm super glad we got to blend and release it. But all of that pipeline has kind of brought me to the point of like, if you can be creative and you can tell people about something and why you made it and why it matters and why you put it together the way it did, that descriptive thing that I learned through all those years of writing is a super effective way to get people interested in the whiskey so they can experience it for themselves. And that's kind of what it's about, between the property and the whiskey. And so that was not a 10-second elevator pitch, but that was that's kind of the journey, right? From critic to creator.
Yeah, and I think that's what we'd all like to be able to do. And so, you've gone and you've tasted these things and you've been able to procure back. How did you land on Virginia? Like, of all places, you could have gone anywhere with this. You could have stored this whiskey anywhere. How did you land on the Commonwealth neighboring Kentucky?
Yeah, certainly. I truthfully spent a lot of time in Washington, D.C. And it turns out that putting a barrel in Washington, D.C. is about the most expensive thing you can do. So D.C. was out. As we started looking, one of the things I think is really cool about whiskey is a lot of times you can go and experience it. You can go to Kentucky, you can meet a bunch of distilleries or go to distilleries, you can go to bars, you can do all that kind of stuff. But the coolest part about the barrel pick experience for me was that you meet the whiskey where it is. Like you experience that in a very different way. And so many people I met would be like, oh my God, I would love to go on one barrel pick. It is a bucket list item for me. And so usually where that story goes is like multi-gajillionaire thinks, ooh, we can commoditize this and make it the most expensive thing. And we're going to corner on the exclusivity. But like, my real goal with Provenance and the goal that we've shared is we have a 130-acre estate or 120-acre estate. It used to be the Mortgage Hall estate. Now it's Provenance estate. And so VS Sundaram, my partner, and I, along with a team of really talented people, have been working to take this estate and modernize it in the most respectful way to something that's been around since 1800. But the real goal is that people who are interested in experiencing Provenance can actually come and visit, and you can spend a half a day and you can taste a bunch of barrels like I would do on any given day and pick your barrel and actually be as close to the whiskey because you're actually going to bottle it there that day and all this really cool stuff. It's like it's an opportunity for people to experience whiskey in a way they haven't before and to kind of learn its own provenance, right? Like you'll get to learn everything about it. And you also know that the bottle that you take home is the bottle that you like the best from the barrel you like the best. And so that to me was kind of an opportunity. Virginia placed well. It was close to the places I was often. VS has really, really liked historic Middleburg. And it turns out that, Middleburg, most people have like a couple thousand acre estate, but there was a little estate that was for sale and it was the perfect fit. And so we've been building relentlessly, but also with an estate that size, the goal has been to keep most of it the way it was. That way we can focus on conservation and growing some food for one of the restaurants we work with, right? Or even growing food for the meals that we cook people that come and join us. And so Middleburg also has a really similar climate to Bardstown, which is really effective. It's about 90%. It's a little damper and a little cooler, but overall it kind of, the more we looked at it, the more boxes it checked. And it was really easy to look at that property and be like, I can see it come together the more you think about it. And that was also really cool.
No, that's awesome. And it's already played host to 10 years of take and some cool things that you all have done. But you've also been able to release different versions of the Reveries and Provenance so far. And so first of all, thank you for sending a sample. As a startup organization, we know that like samples can be hard and you're trying to get every bit of money out of the liquid that you possibly can. I have the Reveries in front of me. The Provenance may have already been drank at a previous
the 14 went quick, right?
Yeah, it didn't last.
It always does.
Most of the time when I see anything 10 plus, I'm like, oh yeah, yep, see you later. And they don't tend to last super long. So which one would you like to focus on first? We'll give you the choice. Which one you would like to dive into first, Reveries or Provenance?
Yeah, I think, I can make a case for either one, but let's start with Provenance because Provenance, I think, tells the full story in the way that we're kind of like an iceberg. Like you see a lot of the Reveries because it's caught on in very vocal circles, but like the iceberg is the big story that's powering all this is Provenance. And so, I think you guys had the 7 and the 14.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've been spraying whiskey out there, so you should have it. My real goal is that, one of the things that also differentiates too is that like I've worked with cognac for a really long time. And in cognac, it's actually really common to put something in the barrel at one proof and then to bottle it at another. And so our 7-year flagship is $70, but it's at a cask strength of 107 proof. And that's because I take my favorite barrels. And one of the cool things is that we have about 1,000 barrels on the property. And so my job's actually pretty hard because my goal is to find the best barrels right now with the intent that anything that's not passing quality control is not failing because it's actually has a flaw. It's just not ready yet. And we have the space, and we have the time. And more importantly, I have enough whiskey that I'm only pulling barrels that I'm certain are going to have the potential to make it into our single barrel program or into the flagship. And so that's really cool to me. But once those get pulled, I actually start to dilute them slowly over time to get them to 107. 107 it's a historic, like a lot of people are like, oh, replicating Weller. But, I tinkered with a lot of proofs. I liked stuff at like 140 when I got started with whiskey, and then I got old, and then 140 hurt me all of the time. And I realized and I give new people whiskey. They say, hey, can I try whiskey? And I go, cool, here's 130 proof, right? And you guys, I'm sure, have seen it. They fall off their stool. They're like, oh my God, this is the strongest thing ever. And you're like, well, it's cask strength whiskey. 107 proof, our flagship, I really like it because at 107 proof, it drinks well neat. It drinks rich. It's full. To me, it has this viscosity that I love. Like it feels like a older, bolder whiskey. But if someone reaches for it and they put it in a cocktail, you're not going to like punch them in the face. It's 107 proof and it can hold up a Manhattan. It makes a good spirit forward cocktail. It also it's like 102 degrees and humid in Virginia for like a lot of the summer. You can put it on ice. It's a good price point. Like you aren't going to have sacrilegious, but also like you put it on a huge cube or you put it on crushed ice, like it also, you're going to taste the whiskey through it. And so I really wanted that flagship to focus on a lot of our story, which is curation. And like it's distilled in Kentucky. It's aged for a couple of years in Virginia. It has different profiles and I'm pulling based on those and diluting and making sure that at 107 proof, this should be the perfect whiskey for 90% of people. Like if someone doesn't like whiskey, I can't help them there, but hopefully we convert a few people along the way. We all know like a guy who only drinks gin and tonic and you're like, here's Van Winkle. And they're like, nope, still gin and tonic. But that graduates into the 14, which is also like, okay, cool. We got you into the family. The flagship is one of my favorite whiskeys. I love to drink it all the time. I bring it everywhere. The 14 though is kind of like, all right, if you like the 7, we can kick it up a notch here. We do have older, bolder, stronger whiskey. We've doubled the age. It's 122 proof at cask strength. And that, to me, that hits like a truck, but in the really cool way. Like, we have whiskeys that are almost 20 years old, and I still come back to the 14. Because that, to me, like a limited edition, it is expensive because the whiskey is expensive and good expensive. And like, one of the cool things is that we can release a whiskey at $70 and $250, but the quality is there and folks have been happy. And we continually sell out of the 14 right when it goes up online and stuff. They also have very different profiles. So I'll break there, but that's kind of the thesis of what goes into these whiskeys to get them where they are right now.
Well, that approaches the consumer in today's market, right? The everyday, that wants the fewer, bigger, better bottle of Provenance 7, right? That meets them, where they are. I want a pour after work.
Right.
That's a great bottle to have. It lasts me a month or two, and then I can go re-up. Where the 14 years, that special occasion, that ultra premium category that bourbon traditionally has not been in, and now is making a statement there with age statements, right? Like, obviously Knob Creek at scale priced one of the best 21-year-old whiskeys we're ever going to see, right? At
So
250
envious.
bucks.
Yeah.
And
like,
you wish you had
them, but also darn it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, people wouldn't bat an eyelash at $250 at 14-year-old bourbon, right? Like, it's nothing to write home about. Like, that is something that's hard to do. And 5 to 6 years ago, we weren't seeing age statements like that.
Right.
I mean, me and you did an Instagram live on Knob Creek 12 and Knob Creek 12 cask strength, and we kind of went back and forth, like nitpicking it. But the price point was there for, $70-$80, right?
Totally.
And I think people are okay with an ultra premium bourbon now because they've appreciated ultra premium scotch or tequila or other spirits at that same price point for that category. So I think you're hitting a really good 2 target market audiences there.
I appreciate that. And I think what's really important to me is that the 14-year-old whiskey costs a lot because it has to, but also I'm really thrilled when people are like, I was a little nervous, but I saved up and I bought it. And this lived up 100%, and that to me is like, all right, A, thank you for trusting us, but B, I'm so happy, like, this is your special occasion whiskey, right? Like, it is very edifying to be like, I say it's worth it because I tasted a lot. Like, I put it together and I was like, all right, this is perfect. It's ready, but then you put it out in the world and you're like, I hope that people actually really do believe that it's worth it, right? Like, a lot of people were like, it's such a cash grab. And I was like, if I could have priced it lower, I would have, like, a lot of people, like, you could have made your 7-year whiskey $100. Like, it's a premium price point. Like, you could have called it luxury. And I'm like, but we didn't. Like, I wanted more people to get that. And so when people get it and then they try it a couple times, like, this is now my favorite whiskey, I'm like, okay, like, that's amazing because that's really what I want it to be, even though it's expensive whiskey. And, but to me, I love doing tastings with people because then I get to drink a lot more of the 14 and it's justified. Because, like, if I could drink it every day, I would, but I'm not even there. Like, it's, it's cool stuff.
Well, I think that with the age statement, the higher age statements, one thing that most people are probably worried about is just like oak influence. It's got too much oak influence. It's one note, but like with this one, it's just more complex. It's so much more than that. It's just every time you go back to it, it's a little bit different. As it sits in the glass and gets a little bit more air, it changes. And I think that's one thing I like about it a lot. It's as you get up in age, you run the risk of the over oaking a bourbon, which I think we've figured that out. A lot of producers have figured that out and how to avoid some of those notes. But you get the value out of a complex whiskey. At a $40-$50 whiskey, I don't expect anything complex, right? If it's one note or 2 notes, I'm totally fine with that. Like, if it tastes good, that's fine. But as I look at, higher priced, higher age statements, I'm looking for complexity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To borrow our good friend Johnny Bourbon, as he's so adequately called, layers of flavor, like an ogre, layers.
Like an onion.
Yeah, like an onion, exactly. But we all, like, that's what we talk about. And that's what I appreciated about the 14. It wasn't over oaked. It has the oak influence, right? It's 14-year-old bourbon, but it's nuanced. And
good.
That's what you're looking for is nuance. And so I love the dichotomy of like, hey, here's double the price. But like, you know, this is something that I always try to help people understand when talking to them in stores. Like if you're randomly like that person's like looking at a bottle and you're like, why is this so expensive? It's an NDP or whatever. Like it takes a lot to do that, right? Like, you know, to procure the barrel, to pay the taxes on the barrel, to then pay the taxes again on the barrel, you know, like knowing what you know, like, were you shocked with the prices that you had to come up with to kind of make that work? Like, you know, how hard is that as a startup to say, you know, we have this really good quality aged bourbon in an ultra premium category, to find the right price point and the research that goes behind that? Because I feel like that's got to be one of the hardest things you have to do.
Yeah, you know, I think it's an interesting industry, right? Because there's a lot of people who get in, right? A lot of people during the boom were like, wait, bourbon's free money. I'm going to invest everything, you know, and some of those people are getting out now that the market has changed. You know, my perspective really was that, and I'm glad you guys kind of talked about the oak thing, right? Like I purchased a lot of this extra age stuff because it actually had the perfect tannin profile to me. It was great now. Like sometimes you taste a whiskey and you're like, wow, we need to bottle that tomorrow because it has so much oak. And I'm afraid it's going to get too much oak and it's going to get bitter and nasty. And it turns out people in the human brain has a lot less tolerance for things that are over oaked and bitter than they do for things like, oh, the prickle of ethanol or flavors that are maybe a little underdeveloped. And so my goal was that we are going to start from the top down. I would rather buy less really expensive whiskey because I am been in the business of buying as little whiskey as possible and making it as different or as developed or as unique or as just like, hey, this stood out, and so I have to have it. I'm gonna get it right. Like we talked about, like, and we'll get to it in the reveries too. Like sometimes, like this is great, and my accountant hates it. I'm like, we have to buy this, and we will figure out the rest later. But this is exceptional stuff, and so we kind of took that tack with the more expensive product, and we're like, I actually bought a lot of this stuff because I want to hold on to it for a few more years. Like I want to see our 14 become 15, 16, 17, 18. And I purchased this that way because it has the oak profile where like hopefully you guys are like, wow, it was close to over oaked. Like it actually has a lot of fruit and a lot of vivacity and like a lot of, you know, kind of pep to it that I think it can go a couple more years in oak or even 5 or 6 more years in oak before it gets too bitter. And that also, it's really great now, and I'm happy to blend and bottle a lot of it now, but I'm also purchased it with the idea to hold on to a good bit of it because we'll blend it. We're going to let it age. Like I'd love to do a single barrel at a high age statement and stuff like that. So a lot of the purchasing is about seeing the future, where I feel like a lot of people buy whiskey because like, this is what I can sell tomorrow. And then tomorrow I'm going to buy more whiskey and sell it the day after that. And there's so many, what I love about what I do is that everyone has a different perspective. Like some people are like, Jay, you are nuts. And I'm like, cool. Probably am.
Got
but
it.
Also, I look at a lot of people and I'm like, you are also nuts, but also like I can learn so much from your approach and you can learn from me. And so like it's kind of cool, like different brands release whiskey different way, different bottlers have different perspectives. Like we invested in bottling on the property because when someone picks a barrel of Provenance, I want to bottle it like the next day because I want them to go home with a full barrel of whiskey that's exactly as they tasted it. And so, you know, I made a lot of compromises in other ways, right? We don't have 10,000 barrels. We have 1,000 barrels. It's a blessing. It's a privilege. We have a lot of whiskey. You know, we're in Middleburg, Virginia, which is about an hour from anything else, which is a huge compromise in some ways, but also it means we have 120 acres and it's scenic and peaceful and it has clean air and it's, you know, it's where I go to relax. So I think the industry is all about which levers are important to you. And like I picked a couple of things, and with my partner VS, like we were like, these are the things we won't compromise on. Here's the things we can compromise on. And here's the things that aren't of value to us. And it led to a very specific shaped product in both Provenance and the Reveries that I think a lot of people are like, these people are nuts. But also I can respect that a lot of other people have different approaches and create different whiskeys. And the market is big enough and there's enough different drinkers that we are all creating something with someone in mind.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a ton of sense. I like what I've tasted. I think that's the most important thing. And that leads us to the reveries. I've been sipping on the samples that landed at Scott's house. He delivered yesterday. And so
Hand delivered. Hand delivered.
I have drank the 7-year single barrel, and I guess this is a small batch is what I'm going to assume that is based upon Scott's writing and my deductive reasoning. These are both very well done. And I feel like you mentioned, this is the brand that has kind of blown up a little bit more. And, you know, there's been super limited releases of ultra age stated product in this as well. So like, how do you determine which goes to which profile and all of that? 'Cause you've got a finite number of barrels. So how do you figure out which profile and program they go to?
Totally. Kind of the timeline's really important here. At the beginning, you guys were like, hey, there's only 2 brands, right? And I said yes, which was like a little bit of a fib. I come from an engineering background. My partner VS comes from an engineering background. We worked in tech, which, all of those fields are very iterative. And iterative means you try something small and you succeed or you fail. And if you succeed, you iterate a little bit bigger. And so when you launch a whiskey brand, you're like, well, it can't be that hard. And plot twist, it's really hard and you're going to mess up a lot of stuff. And even stuff where you're like, that's easy. I know where to fill the bottle level, but it's a little bit colder than it should be in the warehouse. And then it gets warm and then it fills up and the cork pop. Like there's just so many weird little things. And so at the very beginning, Middleburg is known as horse and hunt capital of the world. It's called hunt country. And so people say, hey, you're going out to hunt country. They mean the Middleburg area. It's where fox hunting was historical. It's rolling hills. There's horses, donkeys, chickens, all that kind of stuff. And so we actually do have a third brand. It's called Hunt Country Bourbon. And if you see it on a shelf, something's gone horribly wrong because it's our estate brand. I mean, something's gone weird. It's our estate brand. If you come to the distillery, if you stay at the manor house, which you can do, you're going to taste Hunt Country Bourbon. It was our first label. It's how we tested things. We kicked the tires and we kind of learned how production works and all that stuff. The second brand was the Reveries, and that is the Reveries is sort of me. It's my brainchild. It lets me engage with the stranger parts of what I love to do. And the goal was to launch Provenance and the Reveries together. They were going to fit together like a perfect little cog in a wheel. But I wasn't really happy with how the whiskey for Provenance, I talked about that slow water reduction from like 120-ish proof, 118, 120 down to 107 takes time. And I was like, the whiskey's not ready yet. And so we launched Reveries in February of last year and then Provenance in September of last year. And so a lot of people are like, oh, Reveries is blown up and Provenance is yet. Well, Reveries had 7 months of head start, but also like the whole time I was like, I'm telling an incomplete story that's actually a little out of balance because it's difficult to tell half the story at one time, but Provenance isn't ready and I'm not going to blow it. So Reveries is the experimental. I consider it some of the stranger whiskeys. I consider it the profiles are, Provenance is more meant to power a national brand. I want Provenance to be everywhere, whether it's houses and bars and restaurants and stuff like that. The profile is meant to be more approachable, more classic. I want it to be something that folks like, I can mix this, I can enjoy it, I can love it. The Reveries is a little more unbridled. It's kind of the tip of the iceberg in a weird way. It's where I'm conducting experiments. And so like some of those crazy high age statements that I only had a bit of fits perfectly in the Reveries because the Reveries can't ever be big enough to power a national brand because by the time something is cool and catches on, I'm on to the next thing or I'm blending crazy stuff. And that's where we get to Raven, which is my small batch, but it costs $160. And a lot of people are like, hey, you're crazy. And that's because it's got whiskey that's 7, 8, 10, like 14, 15 years old. Like I'm taking some of my favorite expensive old whiskeys and my accountant is like, why are you blending 15-year-old whiskey? And I'm like, it turns out it tastes really good. And like you can do crazy stuff in small volumes. And so the Reveries is kind of more that skunk works feel and it's where I get to do stuff. And if something is super successful and I'm like, okay, we can scale this up without compromising the quality and it's going to take me some time, I can actually promote it into Provenance in the future. But also if we're like, it's too weird to live and too rare to die and I have 6 of it, it's going to come and it's going to go. And that's kind of what the Reveries is for. And so now that they're both out, it's way easier to explain because a lot of people are like, well, same but different. And you're like, well, actually, I have a lot of crazy stuff like, cognac, Calvados, rum, I'm finishing some stuff. My huge passion is blending. Like I love curating barrels and powering the flagship of Provenance is my day-to-day directive. But like what I love doing is building some blends and like, so like have finishing casks now that will power future blends as components. I'm never going to be Starlight. Starlight is crushing it as Starlight. So I don't need a finishing program because I could also never have enough finishing casks to have enough to meet demand, but 10% Calvados and 1% Amburana and 8% Calvados with a 13-year-old whiskey is my bet for making a new whiskey that the market deserves and it should be on a shelf. And so, Provenance is meant to be a whiskey that can scale responsibly. I have more stock that I can put in the profile of Provenance, and the stuff that is a little weird or a little bold or a little different, I actually pull that over into the Reveries because the folks who are interested in the Reveries, I'm like, hey, it's a little bit strange, but I think you're going to like it. And those folks are like, all right, I think I'm going to like it. And so this kind of lets me cater to everyone that I want to come through the property. in different ways. But the Reveries is going to keep getting weirder, and Provenance is going to keep getting bigger, because my dream is to, like, the Reveries is just getting going, but you can only take weird so big, and like, you can't scale weird, right? Like, when a distiller has an experiment of something and has 5 casks, like, they're not going to, like, the beauty is that there's 5 of them, and that it's always going to be a certain size.
Yeah. Well, we're waiting for the Reverie Sauternes. That's got to come.
It's on the way.
Yeah, I'm sure of it. But like, we actually just sampled Generations in our Patreon tasting club, and I feel like Generations is kind of like a prime example. It took whiskey from all over Wild Turkey. The best, Jimmy's barrels were 7 to 11 years old. Eddie's were, 11 to 14, and Bruce's were the 15 to 17-year-old or 18-year-old that was in that blend. And they put that on at a $400 price point, and no one batted an eyelash. I never saw it on a shelf. So, like it just disappeared. So if you're curating the right portfolio, there's a market for a unique blend that covers high-end whiskeys that create a unique but weird profile that you're not going to get on a daily basis.
Right. And two of the biggest things for me is that, you guys are in media, right? You've seen tons of brands come and go. You've seen them rise and maybe not fall, but like
fall back.
Like, one of my goals is that I think about it every day. Every day I get to work and I think about, how do I make sure that people never talk about Provenance and the Reveries in the past tense, right? Like, I never want someone to be like, hey man, remember when Provenance was cool? Or like, hey man, remember when Reveries was doing like box breaking things that we all really liked? And so, like, it's a lot of pressure personally, but to me, the goal isn't to be like a fad brand, but the goal is to be like, how do I do things that are innovative and cool that folks are like, okay, this is really cool, and I believe in it, and I feel like it was justified, and the price was high on this one and it was lower on this one, but I always felt like I got my money's worth. And so, they're consistently interested in saying, like, what comes next? And I'm interested because the whiskeys I've had so far have been good, and this might be a little more different than I'm used to, but I'm super interested in it, right? And I think about that a lot because there's so much going on, and like, some whiskey, spoiler, I will have some really, really expensive whiskeys in the Reveries, and I know that a lot of people are gonna be like, that's a big number, and I don't like big numbers, but I hope that the folks who like take the plunge on that stuff are like, hey man, that was totally worth it. And for everyone else, like, I love releasing whiskeys at $80 and $90 and $100 and $160, and so, having a nice diversity of things that all have the same core message behind them, but are geared, like, are more available to me is really interesting. So as long as folks never look at the Reveries like, hey man, remember when that brand was cool? I will feel like I've done a good job.
Yeah. So I guess my question would be about pacing. Like, how do you pace yourself with the various releases? Is it, you obviously don't want to overdo it, and then just people feel like, oh, it's just the next thing that he's putting out and then moving on to the next one. How do you kind of balance that as like as a creative?
Right. I think, being a creative is also an interesting thing, because I'm sure you guys see it too, right? Like, some weeks you're like, I had 100 ideas. And then other weeks you're like, I haven't had a goddamn idea in weeks. Something's got to happen. And whiskey's kind of like that too. Thankfully, everything about production forces me to slow down. Like, we said this for years, right? Like, during COVID, you're like, there's no aged whiskey because whiskey can't be made overnight. A lot of these ideas I have, it takes months and years, because I'm not trying to rush them, to get to a point where I'm like, should I release this? And then it really comes down to, like, does it taste, like, to the point where, like, should I pull the lever? You're already months or years into that process. And so that kind of forces me to slow down. Like, also, like, we still don't really, like, Jim Beam could be like, you know what, we're going to do 100,000 barrels this year in a single barrel program. And they could probably do it because they have that much whiskey. I can only scale so quick. And so to me, it's a good reminder that I am set on making the things I'm making. And I have a couple experiments, but also pretty small, can only bottle so much. The temptation isn't really there, because it's also like, I have pretty concrete idea of when I want these things to come out. And if the whiskey doesn't taste ready, it's not ready. And there's really no rush. People would buy it, sure. But if it even contributes a little bit to someone being like, I paid $120 and I didn't think it was worth it, that is so much worse than having not enough whiskey for now. And also, like, my car has 100,000 miles on it. I don't have a yacht. Life is pretty simple. There's no rush to release crazy whiskey, because the goal really is that everything I release, there's this pressure that I want it to be their new favorite whiskey. And so if I try and scale it, if I try and push out new things that I know aren't ready, like everyone who spends that kind of money on whiskey, I expect knows what they like about whiskey. If I sent a whiskey to you guys that wasn't ready, you would know immediately because you guys taste tons of whiskey. And so like that is also like an internal like, and maybe sometimes I work on it too much. Like Raven 4 took me forever because I was like, I'm nervous that people won't like it, and I was like, all right, we got to go. Like it is ready, but it's kind of the two devils, or the angel and the devil sort of paradigm.
Well, and so as you scale, right, as you think about this, like you talked about launching a brand, like, and becoming national, like the distributorship, the like D2C, right? Obviously, D2C very well, probably better than most people, given like your work with Shared Pour. Like, how have you all been able to get this into market? How have retailers been interested in this to bring out single barrels and things like that with the work that you've done with a lot of them, really, in all honesty?
Yeah, that's another no pressure thing. There's a lot of pressure, but there's also like a lot of brands I think feel this pressure like you got to be in 50 states overnight, which is also a really hard thing to do. There's only one of me, and I like to travel, but try as I might, I haven't hit 50 states in a year yet, and Lord willing, I'm never going to try. So, but that's the hardest part, right? Like the hardest part of all of this is when you have people all across the country email you and be like, dude, when are you going to be in my state? I want to buy this. I keep missing out. I want it. I want it. And you're like, I am so sorry. I'm not going to be in Idaho for a while. Like I just can't. Like, and it's not that I don't value where you are. It's just these things, like we have to release things thoughtfully. Like I can't expand everywhere at once. And so picking your partners is really important. And I'm really thankful that, right now I'm in DC, Maryland, Virginia, and New York and New Jersey. It turns out there are a ton of amazing stores, even in that little footprint. And I'm trying to spend time with all of them. And I have a very small team, and it's great to have folks that can get to those stores, but it's also been really cool. More stores have called and said, hey man, one of my regulars, he was like, I've never heard of you and I don't know what you do, but one of my regulars said, I have to try your stuff. And they actually gave me a little bit of their stuff that they have. And I thought it was really good. And that to me is a slow, but really healthy way to do this. And so that's kind of the tack that I'm taking. My motto is like better right than fast. And that's why I think I'm perpetually a little bit behind, but also, if every retailer that gets the Reveries and Provenance is like, hey man, our customers really want it and they like it and they're happy to buy it from us and we taste it and we like it. That to me is a very good way. So I'd say I'm good at D2C because like I have a lot of experience there, but like I've actually been learning how to deal with stores and how to take care of them in the best way. And I've been learning from so many people and even the stores, right? I'm like, I know what I value from my experience, but what's important to you? Like, how do I take care of that? Like, do you care about funny little hats on bottles? Like, would that make a difference for you? Like, could I offer to do this or that? And it's been really interesting where I'd be like, oh, I thought that would have been popular. And like, well, it doesn't really help me. So do this other thing. But to me, that's actually been one of the coolest parts of the process because every customer sort of feels like a partner when they believe in your brand because they're actually out there kind of messaging on behalf. They're like, Jay does this cool stuff and he makes this cool whiskey and I tried Provenance and I love it. And my whole family loves Provenance. And so maybe you guys should carry Provenance. And so, that has been cool to see because there's a lot of imposter syndrome. You're like, do people actually like the whiskey or do they just buy it because it's hot? And then you're like, okay, cool. They actually like the whiskey and they're working with their stores and the stores are reaching out to us. But at the same time, 1,000 stores haven't reached out because it's good to have in moderation. I couldn't help 1,000 stores overnight, and so it's been really nice to see people and have conversations and learn from them what's valuable, and also get to go to a store and then see someone who's a customer of yours and get to talk to them and the store. And it's been really cool because I try and connect with as many people who are customers or fans of the brand whenever I can, and I do events when I travel. But to get to connect with them over these whiskeys too has been really special.
Well, it's kind of like your path in bourbon and whiskey in general. It's just kind of like a snowball effect. It just kind of is a rolling thing that you don't know where it's going to end up, but it just keeps growing, which I think is very cool.
Totally. And stores are always chasing like the next hot thing. And so one of my goals is to be like, a lot of people are asking for this, but I want you to know, like, I'm here to support you for a long time, hopefully. Like, I'm going to keep making cool whiskeys, hopefully. And so like I'm thankful you brought me in, but like, I'm also here to work for you a little bit. So like, tell me how I can like, let's snowball responsibly. And then hopefully, it's a good snowball, right? Like, but it's kind of fun.
For sure. So we have been letting our Patreon members jump in to the conversation, and we have one question in the chat. Just curious, is there anything you can spill the little bit of the tea, as they say these days, on what is happening in 2026?
Yeah, 2026 is going to be really cool. We launched Provenance Estate. I'm trying to think. We launched Provenance Estate as a way for people to come and stay last year, but it was more of like I don't know what to call it, like run a show. This year, we have some really cool stuff planned, whether it's collaborations with other brands at the property. We are going to do, last year, we did the whiskey festival called 10 Years of Take. This year, we're doing it again on August 1st, 2026, called the 11th Hour, and a bunch of info will come out with that. But I have a lot of really cool ways for more folks to get closer to the whiskey and do their own barrel picks, whether they belong to stores or groups or they're just individual people. As far as the whiskey, if you've seen old whiskey so far, you haven't seen it yet. I've got some older whiskey, which is really cool. But also, I've got some really cool blends that I think are going to be really different. And if you've liked the artwork so far, it gets a little cooler or a little grittier, which I think is fun. So I know that's not spilling too much, but I'd say, a lot of people like, oh, you have some really old stuff. Like, hopefully that's not the only cool thing you have. And I have been working for a long time on a couple of things, and if the TTB will approve them, you will see them soon. So, kind of subtle plug, Coming Whiskey is a great resource. So keep an eye out there, and you'll be the first to know that there's some really avant-garde, innovative stuff that I'm excited about that I hope I get to talk about really soon.
A producer that embraces Coming Whiskey. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Some of them grit their teeth at him, but it's good.
No, I love it, man. I mean, it is going to get out there whether you like it or not. And so I also like it because sometimes I find out about my own whiskeys from Coming Whiskey. And that to me is
that it was approved.
You're like, yeah, you're like, the TT, like after the government shutdown, like I'll throw in a plug. The label for Leviathan got approved. And I was like, I wonder when that'll get approved. And then I saw it on Instagram and I was like, oh, okay, they are back to work. Like, cool. Like, And then like
checks
7 hours later,
email.
I got an email that was like, your label has been approved. And I was like, cool. I already knew that, but thank you. So
I'm ahead of the curve.
He's got the fastest fingers when it comes to cola checking in all of the world.
And it's cool because some of the conversations there are really cool, and it gives you an opportunity to kind of, like, I love engaging with people in the comments on my own labels, and it's, it goes to show that you have to tell a good story because even the label sometimes doesn't tell the full story. And you have to be like, well, actually, but
yeah,
is what it is.
So we'll leave you with this as we just eclipsed an hour, which is awesome because the content's been amazing. And here's your elevator pitch out. Where can people get the Reveries if they are not in those few states?
Totally. You're going to want to go to the reveries.co, not com because some guy owned that, but the reveries.co. Actually, we just did the very first drop to the website the day after Christmas. You can sign up there if you're a barrel group that wants to do a barrel pick. The wait list is not eternal. My goal is to get new people in as well as old people who have been there before. It'll have all of your resources. Provenance is available at provenancebourbon.com. We've got some new releases coming in a couple of months, and we're down to our last few bottles of the 14. So if you're interested, if you've tried it, loved it, if you want to try it, that's your opportunity. But provenancebourbon.com and the reveries.co are the sources. And you can find me at Instagram at take.review, T8ke.review. And I'm trying this new thing where I reply to DMs. So if you have a question, it might take me a day, but I've tried to, if you have a genuine question about the brand and you're like, hey man, and you write something nice, right? Like if you say something mean, I'm going to ignore it. But if you're like, hey man, I have a question about this whiskey and the climate, and I was really hoping you could weigh in, like I try and take like 45 minutes a day to sit and look through DMs and answer anyone I can. And so my hope is to take some of the mystery out of this. But those are the three avenues. Obviously, see me on social and Coming Whiskey and Reddit and stuff like that. But that's where you can find me. And hopefully there'll be more drops in the future so less people miss out.
For sure. And if you're a Bourbon Lens Patreon member, you can take a note in the Discord. Just saying, he may or may not reply. He's a busy man. International man of mystery he is as he blends whiskey and travels to the States. But Jay, we really appreciate you joining us and talking about all the things that you are doing now, but also a little bit about your past. And we really appreciate it. And we'll catch everybody next time. Cheers.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys. Cheers.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bourbon Lens. If you want more exclusive content, go over to patreon.com/Bourbon Lens and join our growing community. If you just want to stay friendly with us, you can go over to Instagram, X, and Facebook and follow us there. Also, our YouTube page is growing and we're producing more content there, like Thursday Thoughts and 5-Minute Fridays. So don't forget to smash the subscribe button and catch all the content that we are producing every week. And until next time, cheers.